record. All right. The first thing I want to do is to get you a copy of our workbook, note-taking book for this evening. You may have seen it in the reminder email. If you missed that place to download the workbook, here is the spot in the Google Drive. You'll see it in the chat box. Just a place to organize your thoughts, jot down your notes as we talk this evening. So go ahead and open that up. It is a PDF, so if you need to get up and run to a printer, or if you just want to have it there to follow along, is perfect as well. All right, this evening we are talking about early literacy for English learners and multilingual learners. And you will know that you are in the right place, right? This is for you. If you're an ESL or ELD teacher or the many, many different acronyms we use for an English language development, English as a second language teacher, or a leader in the field, right? This is also for you if you are a content teacher specialist, district leader outside of the ESL world, but you are responsible for or take interest in the literacy growth of your English learners and multilingual students. And if you are a district leader, school leader, and you're looking for some guidance, some ideas, some structures, or some information that will help you in of your teachers moving forward. So if that applies to you, if you are one of those, please give me in the chat and say, that's me. That way I know that you know you're in the right place. All right, give me a that's me if you know. Oh, there you go. You can be creative about it. You can give me another way to say that. Excellent, excellent. All right, so we have like-minded people in the room with similar goals. That always works out well. I also encourage you to scroll through the chat and see who's here. It always happens that there's some connection made through the chat during our webinars, which I love. I have things to share with you, but you have a lot of experiences and expertise to share with each other. So at any time throughout this webinar, if you have a thought, an idea, a resource, something to contribute, please feel free to put that in the chat. If you have a question, I will try to keep up with questions and talk at the same time, right? I try to keep the chat on this screen to my right, so I stay focused. It's easy for me to get distracted by the chat moving, but I'll try to keep an eye on it and answer any questions. But again, this is your time, so feel free to participate and look through and see who's here. There might be someone near you, someone with a similar role. Sometimes we've had people who are from different places, but let's say I'm looking to move to New York, and here's somebody from that area. I can connect and make a connection and share some ideas and resources and collaborate. So make the most of your chat experience this evening. All right. So this session, in my opinion, is going to be unique and valuable because ELP, English Learner Portal, right? I'm Kelly Ryder, the founder of English Learner Portal, and we believe in relevant, realistic, that's a big one, and practical, right? Relevant, realistic, and practical. And so what I'm going to share with you tonight is from a combination of research and experience, right? Lots of time in the schools and classrooms. We spend a lot of time talking to teachers and district leaders and school leaders throughout the day during brainstorming meetings, planning for professional development. We have a lot of conversations around what's going on, school visits and such. And what I think is important is that there's a lot of conversation out in education about how we teach literacy, how we teach reading. And so this presentation is a little bit different because I'm not trying to sell or persuade you or support a particular movement, right? It's not a pro or con to a particular curriculum. It's just analyzing all sides and bringing you the information that I think is most relevant to help you make educated decisions, informed decisions about your ELD and literacy programs. Right, so at any time along the way, if you have a question, concern, again, use that chat box. All right, this evening I have 3 goals with you to cover. Right, the first one being just some background on how the science of reading research and second language acquisition research overlap and places where they differ. Right, so there's a lot of conversation out and about science of reading in districts and states adopting science of reading, and what exactly does that mean, and how does that impact what we know about second language acquisition. I think that if you're here, you probably have felt some of the tension around, are we still doing the right thing for our English learners if we are going full force adoption into science of reading? If you felt that friction, you can give me a confirmation in the chat box there. So we're going to start with that idea and give you some information on how you can speak to that overlap with confidence. Then we'll move into other considerations that we need to have for second language literacy development, about how we work together, how we collaborate, what the roles are for the different players involved. All right, I have some, that's me, the overlap, right. Right. Lisa says not just for English learners. Absolutely. Everything we talk about is going to be true for students other than English learners as well, because we have students who just have some difficulty with literacy or don't have well-developed language, and for various reasons. So yes, we're going to include lots of students in this conversation this evening. And then I want to share with you a flexible and highly effective approach to literacy development that is an idea, a protocol, lesson planning protocol that you may find useful moving forward in instruction. All right. As I said, I appreciate the time you are taking this evening to be here. I love when people show up live, even though we post a recording. I love to have people live to talk to and give input like you are in my chat box over here, and to add to the discussion. And so in appreciation for showing up live tonight and sticking with me through to the end, I am going to give you links to a PDF of the slide deck, so you have that information to refer back to, or to share with others, or to take to a meeting where you're trying to share a message. And then to be on the practical and useful side that we talk about, I want to share with you, we talked about a lesson planning sequence or protocol that we'll get to at the end, toward the end, and I'm going to share with you one that is already done and planned and scripted that involves 6 lesson plans that you can just take and try out to see if that strategy works for you. All right, so lots going on, lots going on. I'll send you links to that in a bit. So I went to college. I went to University of Maryland back in the day, and I, got a degree in linguistics, specialized in ESL. I took courses about teaching reading and teaching writing to English learners, and I left there feeling like I've got this, right? I've got it. And then I got hired and I realized that there was a lot more going on in the school than than what I knew about based on my college courses, right? And so what I'm hearing across the country from everyone is saying the same thing, right? I'm pretty positive that even though I'm meeting you for the first time, most of you, I see a couple familiar names here, that you can relate to this picture. Lately, over the past couple years, literacy instruction especially has become like this confusing tug of war. Everybody, the demands have just grown like crazy. And one challenge you're probably experiencing when it comes to this is that the curriculum used in the English language arts classroom at times or in certain places doesn't quite fit all of your students. It would be really hard to find a curriculum that fits all students in all fairness, right? Not picking on any particular curriculum. It is hard to find one that fits all students. And so immediately, as someone who is working with English learners and other students who are approaching literacy a little bit differently, you are automatically pulled in many directions of people with different opinions who have goals for the students, but want you to help in different ways, right? This person wants you to do this, and this person wants you to do that. And can you help me with this? And can you take this? And you're being pulled in all different directions, right? So I don't say this to make you feel guilty in any way, but just to say that if you are having the same struggles, then you're not struggling alone. Right? This is something that we're hearing nationwide. And so we're just going to take it from where it is, from this feeling here, and see if we can get you to a place tonight where you are feeling a little bit more focused and confident in what you want to advocate for going forward. All right, so you feeling a little bit like this picture these days? Or did you just get so much rest over winter break and like we have a lot of East Coast folks and these snow days gave you a little extra time, right? Feeling stretched? So when I was first hired into a role as an ESL teacher, I was split between two schools, which many of you have experienced. And in that time, I taught 3 days a week at one school, 2 days a week at the other school. And no one told me at University of Maryland, I love them, but no one told me that I would have students in grades 3 through 5. I know I'd have students in grades kindergarten, first grade that didn't read, but no one told me that there would be second graders and third graders and fourth graders and fifth graders who didn't know how to read. Later years, when I worked in secondary, I also learned that it goes all the way through all grades where we have students who are struggling with literacy or who weren't really exposed to literacy instruction before their time of coming to US schools, or for many, many reasons are behind. And I entered that year feeling confident and within 2 or 3 days felt totally lost, right? I had no idea. I knew how to do comprehension. I knew how to teach writing. I knew how to do all these different things with the text, but not how to get them started, right? Not a reading teacher. I was a ESL teacher. And I'm going to admit, and this will date me, that in my search for finding something that would work with my students, I purchased a Hooked on Phonics kit. Have you heard of Hooked on Phonics? Do you remember those commercials from way, way back when, right? Hooked on Phonics worked for me. Those are the commercials that they had. The Hooked on Phonics kit, I have to tell you, I look back and I think, what were you doing? But some pieces of it were very effective. Like my students started to read and they got more confidence. They felt less self-conscious. And we were able to do that in our small group pull-out, which made it a lot safer. And so some things about it really worked, but I knew that that was not really the solution. And I went on a search to find people who would point me in the right direction. And I had the most amazing reading specialist in one of my schools who started the chain of sending me to different people along the way who could give me some idea. Those were the days also where reading recovery was a huge program, and I learned a ton from the reading recovery teacher about a systematic way to work students through. And just so many things along the way. You know, you work in a school, you have professional development around everything under the sun over a 30-year career, right? And my goal for you tonight is for you not to have to take, I would say, before I felt really good, like then this one person presented to me and I was like, yes, right? They really narrowed down what the big ideas were, what the important pieces were. And I felt like, here's the moment where this is what I need to take and run with. And I mean, I apologize to all the students I had in like the first, I mean, probably 10 years of my career as I tried to figure it out. And so tonight, my goal is to try to save you 10 years and help you skip to the end of what we know from ongoing research and practice that works for our English learners. Again, nothing is 100% works for every student, but is definitely the complement that you're looking for to help you get your students moving and to get you some focus and peace of mind. Yeah, don't take the long road like I did. All right. I think I didn't fully introduce myself at the beginning, but I'm Kelly Ryder. I am the founder of English Learner Portal, and I bring you these lessons learned and practical tips after 27 plus years in public school. And I had the wide range of roles, like most people who work in public schools for any, or schools in general, in any span of time. You try different jobs, try different roles. And I'm really grateful for all those opportunities because I feel like it's given me a chance to look at instruction and look at what teachers do every day from a variety of viewpoints that give you different perspective, right? To understand how everyone is looking at this and help us try to find somewhere in the middle that we can all agree is a good place. So based on that experience, that's where we're going this evening. So if you were able to open the workbook or if you downloaded it earlier this evening, on page 7 is a place where you can jot down, like, what are you feeling about literacy right now, right? What are your struggles, your happy places, your concerns? So let's take a moment and you can either write that in your workbook or in your personal notes, or if you're willing to share, I'd love to hear some of where you stand right now in the chat box. So how are you feeling about literacy instruction right now? The good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly. Let's see what you have to say. Heather says so many different levels of need and support. Right. Lots of variety. Go ahead and continue to add your thoughts there. I would love to hear how you're feeling right now. So as you type and explain for time's sake or are writing in your journal, I'm going to take a guess. Nice. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you. I'm going to guess you're somewhere on this screen. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed by the literacy gap. And what I mean by that is where your students are supposed to be according to your district guidelines and where they really are as far as their literacy development. We talk about how we need to close the gap, right, in literacy instruction. And there's so much out there we'll talk about more in a minute, but that you have to teach like 1.5 times as much in the same amount of time. But nobody tells us how to do that. Like, how do we teach more in the same amount of time and close that gap? You might be feeling that you have lack of a voice. I hear this one a lot, especially when we're in workshops and someone will say, this is great, but I don't get a say. They tell me what to do, or I don't know where this could fit because we're given this program that we have to use. And so you've kind of feeling like a lack of voice, lack of control in what happens with your students during literacy. Maybe you feel like we're totally going down the wrong path. Maybe you feel a little bit guilty for not knowing what to do. I can tell you, I feel to this day, how many years later, it's been 30 years now since that Hooked on Phonics experience, about 30 years or so, 32 years exactly. I still feel guilty and think back to those students and think I want to find them and apologize for not knowing what to do, right? I think they learned, but oh, I'd want to go back in time, right? Okay, let me read through your chat box things here. The first language, second language connection, absolutely. So our Orton Gillingham, I hear lots of good feedback about Orton Gillingham trainings and things like that that seem to work. Overwhelmed, right? You really could write a lesson plan for every student, that's for sure, right? So how do we find a happy place in the middle? Not reading on grade level, right? So Gabrielle is concerned about not reading on grade level. And then there's demands of a new curriculum. So they're missing more by not being able to fully engage with that curriculum, which causes us a lot of concern and worry. Right? Okay. Focus on particular pieces that maybe you feel like aren't giving students everything they need. Too much of one thing, not enough of another. Grade level expectations have gone wild. That's for sure. I'm all about rigor. I love high expectations, but realistic expectations are where I like to spend my time. Frustrated. Right. Sorry, I'm reading Megan's here. Megan says, I struggle with this when I'm only pushing in because I'm supporting students learning the content, science, math, social studies, those kinds of things, when I know they need more support with literacy and I don't have time to do that. That I would say, if I had to pick the number one pain point that I hear, that's the number one of trying to find time in the schedule to do the great things you can do with push in, but then also where's the time where you get that, where students who need something a little different get that time, right? Where to find places for writing. Thank you, everybody who's sharing. I hope that the sharing also helps you feel a little validated that you're not the only one out there who's struggling with these things. And I can tell you for sure that you're not, or else we wouldn't have felt the need to come together tonight and have this conversation if you were alone in this. So hopefully we can work together this evening to take you to here, right? To have our mind shift. So I would like you to be able to end this evening. I'm not saying we'll have all the answers. That's not a realistic expectation, but a mind shift, right? I want you to be able to say, I have the knowledge to guide others, right? I may not have all the answers, but I have the knowledge to help others in making good decisions for our students, right? And participating in that with confidence. I can advocate with research backing me up, right? So if there's a change you feel needs to happen, you will have research behind you to help you have those conversations. I want you to have some ideas of how to plan when you do have time in small group with your students, that you have a protocol that you can use to quickly, efficiently, effectively plan literacy lessons in a way that is speedy and fun for students and really effective, right? And I want you to say that you feel confident in what you have to offer in this big picture that is developing language and literacy, right? None of us can be expected to know all the pieces and everything, right? We need to know our place, know our specialty, know what we have to offer, and advocate for that and educate others. I love that you're sharing resources there. Katie Topple, one of my favorite people, not only favorite teachers, but one of my favorite people. She is a very generous, giving teacher who will share her things, and follow her on whatever platform you're using you for sharing there, Carol Ann. All right. Now let's get into our 3 big ideas. So if you're using your workbook, the workbook is broken down into big idea 1, big idea 2, big idea 3 to help you pace out your note taking. So in big idea 1, I'm going to give you some information about research and experience that will help give you a real solid foundation and boost your confidence that you can advocate for the right things. I'm going to share, we don't have a lot of time tonight, so I'm going to share the highlights, and then we can always find times to follow up and get into more details. So two resources I highly recommend if you are struggling with these topics are the Response to Intervention 2, RTI 2 handbook, especially if you are in a WIDA consortium state. If you are in a WIDA consortium state, this is published by WIDA, and it has great structures and questions to ask and pieces to see, like, do we have all the pieces in place for our program? So it's a framework that talks about literacy instruction for English learners. And it's really helpful to have something from an organization like WIDA, something from the University of Wisconsin for our Wisconsin folks here tonight, that says, research says we need these elements in our program, and you have that book to back you up. So highly recommend that. You can get it, you can just Google search it. You can get it from the WIDA website in their download library. You can download for free. They also have spiral bound copies you can buy, but the download works just fine as a guide. Another resource that I highly, I can't say highly enough, right? Enough highlys recommend is Dr. Samuel Ortiz. Dr. Samuel Ortiz works with the psychology of assessment, and he's been doing a lot of research around and working with school psychologists who do the identification of whether a student needs special education or not. I have the privilege of working with Dr. Ortiz on a grant that is focused on over-identification of English learners, which is how I came across him. And his research is vast, and he has lots of great ideas about how to effectively evaluate students of, is it language or is it something else? And he has wonderful personal firsthand experiences of what it was like being an immigrant student in school through that learning literacy phase of life where he thought he had some kind of learning problem and later realized that he didn't. So he is wonderful. You can Google him also. He does a lot of kind of webinars, lectures, guest speaking appearances, but has lots of articles and publications around his research. So if you're looking for that solid, back you up printed material, those are 2 great places to go for you to take to the table in conversations. All right, what I'm doing is boiling down those 2 resources and many others into like 5-10 minutes of telling you the big ideas, right? So it goes deep. All right, so this is from a presentation that Dr. Ortiz did, and a topic that he speaks about often. He was talking about the language gap, right? And what the language gap is, where it comes from, how it impacts our students. And so I'm going to give you the really, really quick summary of what this is. He has done tons of very technical research with lots of data, as you can see on the left-hand side. You know, it's very, very detailed. But what I want to point out to you in our very quick understanding is that the red dotted line is the language exposure, the exposure to English for our native English speaking students. Right, so the bottom is grade level and age. And along the side of our graph would be the number of hours of exposure to English. Right? How many hours has a student been exposed to English at the different ages? And through lots of research has concluded that when you look at birth, we have 0 hours of exposure to English. Though there is a lot of research about in utero, but he left that part out because that's hard to measure. And within the first year where students are, within the second year where students are. So if we follow this by second grade, English speaking students have had about 10,000 hours of exposure to English, right? 10,000 hours. As we go up, so maybe a fourth grader is reaching about 20,000 hours of exposure to English. The blue line would be representative of the research for our English learners, assuming that they are not exposed to English until they enter school in kindergarten. We know that some have other exposure to English before kindergarten, which is all a bonus, which would change the graph slightly. But for students coming in fresh into kindergarten, is their first English experience, and then considering when they first start kindergarten, our English learners are at a deficit of 18,250 hours of exposure to English, right? So when we talk about catching up or closing the gap, there really is no way to substitute for 18,000 hours of exposure to something. Like, we can't recreate that. So we have to find the practices that can do the best to speed that up or maximize it, because we can't recreate that. So it often helps when working with administrators and content teachers to explain that closing the gap just is a challenge, right? This shows you what that gap is visually. So by the time we get up to about fourth grade is where we see the divide start to happen. Fourth grade is where we really start requiring more academic language. You need more literacy to access the content areas. Fourth grade is where that CALP, cognitive academic language proficiency, really kicks in for all students. And when you hit that point and you are 24,000 hours behind in English exposure, then it's just such a disadvantage for being able to access that cognitive language. And so what we have to do now is think about the gap naturally continues to widen if we don't do anything, right? We need to do something to address that space. And giving all of our students the same curriculum, the same instruction, is not going to change that blue line trajectory. We need that blue line to come this way. Putting something equal across all students is not going to change that blue line, right? So that's your gut feeling is confirmed that there has to be some things we can do to move that line inward. So continuing on with his research, I'll give you a minute to read this screen. right? So we're beginning behind. And in order to catch up, we have to have students making 1.5 years progress every year in school, right? So 1.5 times faster. NCE, does he have what, I'm looking quickly to see. I'd have to dig and see what that acronym is there. From the 20th to NCE, right? So to be able to get there, they have to move 1.5 times faster. And again, the 1.5 times faster, right? That mind shift is we have to do something to make that happen, because reading the same teacher script or giving the same curriculum or using all the same things isn't doing it. Which leads us to big idea number 2. Supplement versus repeat and supplant. So just define these terms really quick. Supplement, of course, is providing extra, right? Providing more, providing different things that will help close that gap. Repeat and supplant. Our instruction may supplement what is going on in the classroom, or our instruction may repeat what is going on in the classroom, which ends up being supplanting. And supplant is like a grant-related term word that we use to say it's kind of just replace. Okay. So as the English language development teacher, your federally gifted responsibility is to supplement core instruction, right? You're giving extra. Sometimes, oftentimes, our teachers fall into, instead of supplementing, you're pushed into the role of repeating core instruction or supplanting or replacing core instruction. And so we want to talk about the differences between those two things. Our goal is that supplement. We want to supplement instruction, close those graph lines there. So in another resource is an article from the Council of Great City Schools. And it didn't hit me before this, but in the Google Drive folder I'll share with you in a bit, I will also add this article, because I'm only going to share a bit with you, but if you read the entire article, it's very informative, very affirming for those in the ESL field, and very easy read for those who aren't ESL with ESL backgrounds to see what are some of the missing pieces here. So what this is saying, and this came up about because there was a lot of conversation around science of reading. And so the science of reading and the ESL folks were all up in arms of like, nobody's looking at our research. Nobody's looking at our research. You're putting a one size fits all when we talk about, thank you, Lisa, normal curve equivalent was not coming to my mind. There was no communication between the two worlds, which never helps. So the Council of Great City Schools were really the first ones that I know of that got the science of reading folks and the English language development folks in the same conversation and compared notes and talked about the research. Right. So I just highlighted a few of the things that jumped out to me, which everyone acknowledged that 80% of the research on reading has been done on monolingual English speakers. So when we look at reading research, we have to take into consideration that a lot of our students who we're serving were not part of that research, right? And then when we try to apply these things to second language, sometimes it works, sometimes there are some flaws. The other piece that really stood out based on conversations I've had with teachers across the country is that the idea that bottom-up phonics and phonemic awareness, and somebody mentioned this in the chat, right, that our tendency in language arts is to over focus there if students aren't progressing. So this is what I mean by repeat or supplant, right? If it's not happening, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. And what this looks like in the classroom is it turns into, and you can say, yes, I've experienced this, or no, not true for me in the chat. But how this plays out in the classroom are different scenarios where you might say, Miss English Language Development teacher, I'm going to pick somebody other, Miss Benson. Miss Benson, this student is not working up to grade level in reading right now. They're really struggling with the phonemic awareness. When you take them in your small group, could you please, work on these phonics sheets, or work on the letters, work on the sounds, continue to work on such and such, right? Where you're being asked to reinforce, right? To repeat what the content teacher is teaching and reinforce those concepts, which leaves Miss Benson probably feeling like, I want to do what you're asking. I want to be a team player and I want to help, but I also know that my students need other things too. So it leaves you in the middle and in a bind. And I did see that in the chat box a couple times. It also plays out to be that we're keeping students from experiencing other things because of where they are in literacy, right? Oh, well, they're not there yet to read that text, or they're not yet there yet to participate in this writing activity, or they're not there yet, right? All right. Miss Benson, I'm glad that applied to you because I just picked your name out of the chat box. So thank you.
You were so accurate. I'm like, are you like, I'm going to say this figure of speech. Are you a fly on the wall at my school?
I have been following you, Miss Benson.
Yay. Miss Benson, can you help me? I'm so glad you came into the classroom at this time.
Exactly right. And that's what it sounds like too. To be like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. So-and-so didn't finish their worksheet from yesterday. Could you, whether it's math or whatever, could you help them finish that? And you're like, oh, when does English language development happen? Right. So you're not alone. This is everywhere, right? That we do kind of feel like, I'm Siri and I'm listening in, but that's because everyone is struggling with the same thing. You're walking down the hall with your group and you have a plan, you have this great lesson plan, you can do language development, and somebody runs up and says, hey, we're about to start a new unit. Could you pre-teach this vocabulary today so they're ready for tomorrow? And you're like, oy, like, here I go. I'm the bad guy if I say no. And if I say yes, then I don't do what I know they need, right? Constant battle in our brains. Constant. So here's the mind shift that I propose, right? This is what we need for our students to really grow and close that gap, right? There's a lot of research about program models and things like that. And I can tell you that Dr. Ortiz, which I'll share some links to some video of Dr. Ortiz, so you can go into more details if you want about the research. But he also talks about bilingual education, push in, pull out, those kinds of things. And what has been found to be most effective is English language development instruction that is based on a classroom core content area context. Right. So I can take what you're doing in social studies, I can take what you're doing in math and use that as my context for my English language development instruction. But there still needs to be English language development instruction. And that's where we lose it, because we start making everybody teach toward the core standard, and we're not combining the core standards with language development standards. And our ELD people lose that focus. So one thing I want you to get comfortable saying when you're advocating for your role as the ELD teacher is to say, Title III law, federal law says that we have to regularly be teaching to the English language development standards of our state, right? That's the law. I need you to be able to say what I'm doing right now is related to what English language development standard. There's so much overlap. You can definitely find it, and we'll talk about some ways to plan that. But you have to be focused on a standard. So if someone says, can you teach how to add fractions? That's kind of going, what I would suggest instead is tell me what you want them to be able to do with the fractions, like adding the fractions. What do you want them to be able to say, explain? Like, what's your end goal? And I will help them with the language it will take. I'll help them with the vocabulary of fractions. I'll help them with how to explain their thinking about fractions, about the process. Like, there's a lot of language in there that you can still help with fractions, but you stay on language and they stay on math. Because when we crisscross into each other's areas, like when I had to go in the classroom, push in, co-teach in algebra, it would have been a total disservice to those students if I was trying to teach them algebra, right? I listened to the algebra teacher, and then I help them be able to understand and give back information about algebra, right? So I use this visual, and hopefully this can help you explain it to others with the supplement versus repeat and supplant. If our goal is to grow some trees, if all of us come into this project where we're going to grow a little grove of trees outside our school for a nice place, for some shade, all of us come to that project with a tree, we aren't going to be very successful at growing trees because here we are with a bunch of trees in a bucket and nothing to do with them, right? I want you to think of each of the people in this picture as as people with different expertise, right? Maybe the teacher with the tree is that reading teacher, that trained core reading teacher who has the curriculum and the program and the materials for teaching reading. And she's got the primary, or he or they, primary responsibility of presenting that instruction, right? You can't do reading instruction without your core teacher who's bringing the tree. But the tree isn't going to grow if we don't have somebody that brings the shovel to plant the tree into the soil. So maybe the shovel that goes with it, maybe that's our ELD teacher, right? We're not going, or let's say our tree is the math teacher. Our math teacher brings the knowledge of the fractions. If we don't bring the ELD teacher with the shovel, with the language knowledge, then our math isn't going to grow. If we have the math and we have the shovel to dig the hole to plant the tree in, then our math has a better chance to grow. Let's say we have administrators who have higher level understandings of processes and scheduling and strategies and management, those kinds of things. Maybe they're the ones with the little, I don't know what that thing is called, the little mini rake, what's that called? They come with that because they're going to help you get past scratching the surface. They're going to help you dig a little deeper, and that's going to help grow our tree. Then over on the left, maybe this is the math specialist, or if we're talking about reading, maybe it's the reading specialist. And we need the reading specialist to bring extra knowledge of reading research or extra time, or maybe that's the interventionist who's going to bring something different to the table and water that tree and help it grow. So it's the collective knowledge of the experts involved that move students in that chart. If you take one away, we slow down the potential progress. So if a student is struggling with literacy or struggling with phonemic awareness, and then they go to an intervention that is about phonemic awareness, and then you ask the ESL teacher to teach phonemic awareness, there's no way for that tree to grow beyond that point, right? So what we are suggesting is that each of us take a little different approach because one of them is going to stick, or the combination of them is going to stick. So we all can't be focused on repeating the same instruction. We all have to come from our own unique specialty and direction. So when we're talking about the English language development side, we want our ELD teachers to be focusing on meaningful context connected to the curriculum. So if you're pushing in, you're immediately connected to the curriculum. If you're pulling out, you want to show that you continue to try to stay connected to the curriculum. Use the vocabulary, the themes, the topics, the big ideas that they're doing in the classroom helps smooth the transition. We have to help students, as it's highlighted here, build the schema, build the background knowledge. That's a piece that's missing in a lot of our grade level curriculum because we assume our English speaking students have had the years before, where our new students don't always have those years before. Here's the big one that if you can only think of one thing that will be your specialty with students as an English language development teacher, and if you're a content teacher looking to add one thing that will really help you contribute to the good of the cause, it will be oral language development. Oral language development is really what I see as the key missing piece in our literacy instruction. Oral language is the foundation for literacy. So if I can say what I'm thinking, I have a much greater chance of being able to read those ideas from myself or someone else. And I have a way better advantage when it comes time for me to write my ideas. That oral language development is practice. It's practice for literacy. It's gaining the confidence with the language so that you can use it in literacy. So if you're the ELD teacher pushing into the classroom and it's really confined in what the curriculum allows you to do, if you become the leader of oral language development, if you become the person who reminds, let's stop and talk about this for a minute. Let's turn, do some turn and talk, think, pair, share, but you give them some sentence frames to help structure the conversation because you know this is leading to a writing assignment. So give them that structure. Help them do this oral language development. If you are pulling out, same thing, oral language, oral language, oral language. Yes, I then want you to be able to take it to literacy, but that's step one. If you walk away with only having step one, if you become the master of oral language in whatever classroom you go to, and you continue to advocate for, lead, structure, that oral language development, insist on it, you will be making a good contribution to the good of the cause. Our students need to use the language to learn the language, and it's missing from most of our curriculum. From there, we can take you into other things, but that is step one. So baby steps, right? If you can conquer any giant in the next couple weeks, oral language is that giant. So then we look at another resource. This is our 3 ways to ensure English learners benefit from the science of reading. So another collaboration, and this is a group called New America that has been collaborating with some science of reading experts. Again, you can Google them. They write lots of articles. They have lots of perspective. But I really liked the way they summed up and created a visual for the science of reading English language development research conflict that was going on. So if you've had any science of reading training, you've heard about the 5 pillars, right? There's been 5 pillars going around for a while. So phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. Absolutely every single one of those is crucial for English learners as well. Absolutely. Where the research kind of gets hazy is that the science of reading research does include oral language and background knowledge, but kind of as a on the outskirts, right? It's not a focus. It's like a, yes, these are important, but they really focus on the 5 pillars. So what that's been doing is when we focus all of our teachers on the 5 pillars, those 2 pillars that language development research tells us are crucial are being neglected. So if we could agree that we're all working together, if some of us are working on the 5 pillars and some of us are working on the 2 pillars, or that we work together more to make sure all 7 are being done, and maybe we're sharing that responsibility, would be wonderful, right? So if you think of your core classroom content area reading teachers as the green side, and your ELD teachers as the red, the more the red teachers learn about what the green teachers do, the better off we all are. The more the green teachers learn about what the red teachers do, the better off we all are. So again, one of you bring the tree, one of you bring the water, one of you bring the shovel. All of these pieces are really important, and we have been losing ground because we have cut out that oral language and background knowledge development, and it's usually due to time constraints. Right? We usually say we don't have enough time to have discourse. We don't have enough time to talk about everything. Well, if you do make time, you will save time later by spending more and more periods teaching things that you don't need to repeat because our students understood it better. All right, I'm going to pause for a brief minute here, take a breath, let you process. So in the chat, how does that feel for you? When I say that here are 2 areas of responsibility, the green relate to the classroom teacher's job description, the red, I mean, all of them relate to all of us. Let me just say, we've been missing the red pieces. So who is the best person to bring that is our English language development teacher. So when we partner, we can partner like that, or we can really partner to learn each other's role and make sure all pieces are incorporated. If you focus on adding more oral language development before writing, or more oral language development before trying to read, you will find much success. And that's a great goal for the rest of the school year. So just quickly, I'll be quiet for 30 seconds and tell me how that's feeling for you. What's your reaction to that? Okay. All right, I'm trying to catch up on your comments too while you're typing. So we have here in Kathy saying, dual language teacher in a 50-50 model. Kudos to your school for being able to offer that. That is, the research shows gets the best results for students. And there is a monolingual way to teach reading, and there is a bilingual way to teach reading. And I think the best way you can do that is just to begin to advocate with the research in your pocket and pull a couple of these little ideas. Go back to Dr. Ortiz, really listen. I'll share links with you in our follow-up email. Listen to how he explains what's needed. He's really good at summarizing it. Look at this Council of Great City Schools and how they summarize it, and get comfortable with that elevator speech, and make it so that they see that if you bring this and I bring this, we'll have the right combination. Oral language is good for everyone. Absolutely. Nobody speaks fractions. Nobody speaks algebra. Nobody speaks biology, right? Everybody needs this language development. It speeds up the literacy. Enlightening the visual. Yeah, this visual really did it for me, of like, this is how we work together. It is hard when there's an emphasis on Dibble's data. We'll save that for another day. You don't want to get me going on that one. Dibbles, again, is an assessment based on monolingual research. I'll leave that there. All right. Excellent, right? So this structure here is showing you the collaboration, right? Each color has its own primary responsibilities. And then we have the responsibility of learning from each other and crossing as much as I can. So anytime I can work in phonics or phonemic awareness, or I can work in vocabulary, yes, I'm going to do it. But I also need to be the one that makes sure that language development is happening. I am the advocate for that. That's where my police person role is. So now I want to shift you into something a little bit practical. We talked a lot about in theory. And I will say up front that if you are in a situation where you are teaching in a place where you're pushing in and you're supporting content and you don't have small group pullout time, that this last part might frustrate you, because this really needs to be that small group time. It might be small group within a room. In the last district where I worked as the ESL coordinator, we used what I'm about to share with you as a pre-intervention for English learners. So when Dibbles was saying that they needed to qualify for intervention, we had a flow chart and it said, this student qualifies for intervention based on their Dibbles scores. What is their English proficiency level? If their English proficiency level is a 1 or a 2, then they are going into an ESL related program. If their proficiency level is 3 or higher, then they have the language. So something else is happening. And so they can go into whatever intervention other students are doing because they already have the language. If they don't have the language yet, that explains why their scores aren't so good. And so what we implemented was a program called the Whole to Part Protocol. Now, again, this is good for small group, and you can do whole group, but you know, if you have one, but not many places have curriculum flexible enough where you can take over the whole class. But if you have, like, you pull your newcomers or you pull your beginners, this is perfect. So the Whole to Part protocol is the most flexible, effective, and efficient way to plan your small group language and literacy instruction. My opinion, right? So this is housed in the research of systemic functional linguistics. So if you want to get technical, you need some research background to back you up. Systemic functional linguistics says the same thing that the other research we were talking about was saying, which is students learn best when they're making meaning. They learn language best when there's meaning. When they are part of making the meaning, creating the message. And so we take a little bit of a different approach, which holds apart. If you think about teaching literacy as a funnel, right? Holds apart, we go this way. Traditional reading instruction is this way, right? We start with phonemic awareness and phonics. Then we build up, you know, we're combining sounds. Then we go to words, then we go to phrases, then we go to sentences, then we go, right? We start with the little parts and we build our way up. In whole to part, we go this way. We start with the big idea, the meaning, the message. We start with getting that down in paragraph, sentences, whatever is needed. And then after we get the meaning down and after we talk about the sentences and words we use to do that, then we can break it down into its tiny bitty phonics and phonemic awareness type parts. And it sticks better with our students because they have meaning, right? Those nonsense words and dibbles, that's not going to stick because there's no meaning to it, right? We need a message. And then when I break that down into little parts, I understand it because I know where it came from, right? So it's this way. So what that process is in lesson planning is we start with oral language development, right? Then we move that to collaborative writing. There's lots of ways to do collaborative writing, but that would be our next step. Then we take what we did in collaborative writing, right? That collaborative writing is all the students' ideas. They come up with the ideas. They have all the meaning. They know exactly what the message is that we wrote. Then we take that into developing some reading skills and fluency by continuing to read and reread and repeat what they wrote. Right? They know what it says, they know what it means, they remember, they start to make the one-to-one correspondence with what comes out with my voice, matches something on the paper. They're starting to understand that. They make a lot of connections, very similar to language experience approach, right? And then we can break that down into small groups and such. So let me give you an example of what there's a lot of different ways it can go together in a classroom, but here's a typical, this is what we did for that pre-intervention program. So oral language development, you find an image related to something the students are learning about. So maybe fractions are in my mind today. Maybe I find an image that has somebody like a bakery window with pies that are cut into pieces or something. Or maybe it's a picture of a pizza, who knows, something with fractions. And then you take that picture prompt and you do the oral language development. What's happening? Who do you see? What do you see? Who's involved? Where are they? You just have all kinds of conversations around the picture. It's important that that picture has rich language built into it. You want to look for a picture that will pull the right vocabulary out, right? I want to say pieces, parts of a whole, the whole thing, dividing, all those kinds of words that you want. You need to make sure your picture will elicit those things. You can pick a science topic. You can have a picture of someone walking down the street in a blizzard with an umbrella. You can it could be anything. You determine what content you want them to work on. Now, in that oral language development, your planning is, I need to think of my context. Great if I talk with my content area teacher who can help me with one that will have meaning for students and make connections. What vocabulary is crucial? What kinds of sentences do I want them to be able to say? And then what's our final, what's our writing product going to be? Are we going to write a narrative? Are we going to write a step-by-step explanation? Are we going to persuade somebody? You have to know where you're going before you start, because you want that oral language to elicit all that they're going to need. Then we move to our collaborative writing. Depending on the level of students, it could look different ways. For our new students, our students with the least developed literacy, this is going to be where a teacher has the pen and students are giving ideas, right? So we're going to write a narrative about, this picture we have here. And you go through what's a narrative, what's included, right? We have to have characters, we have to have a setting, we have to have this, we have to have that. You need to know where you're going. I also need to know my proficiency level. So am I targeting a level 2, a level 4? Like, what do I want my product to be? You should base your product on what your students' target proficiency. That's how you really get the biggest bang for the buck. So we're saying, okay, give me some ideas. So maybe first you're just brainstorming. Maybe you jump right in and write it. You might just be writing one sentence per person if they're new beginners. You'd say, oh, Christine said that ... And, you do some collaborative writing. You're writing this all together, you as the scribe. With students who are a little bit more proficient and have a little bit more literacy, you could do partner writing, you could do small group collaborative writing. You could do a lot of different ways, but most of the time we start with, I'm the writer and my students are giving me ideas. The reading piece. as we are writing our collaborative writing, I need chart paper. I should have had some chart paper here. I write one student idea, one sentence, and I'm like, I love that, right? Let's go back and read it together. You go back to the beginning and everybody read it together. Okay, now let's add our next idea. You get the next idea from students, you add it, you're like, this is going great. All right, let's go back to the beginning again and remember what we said. Go back to the beginning and everybody reads it through. Chorally read it if you want to stop and let students have individual turns. But the idea here is that all students are repeating as much as possible. Oral language development connected with the visuals for literacy. Add the third sentence, go back to the beginning. That repetition is a key piece. Go through, do. Okay, we're going to read all 3 sentences. All right, I love this so far. What's our next idea? The repetition does a lot of things, right? It helps cement those English structures that they're repeating over and over based on your model, and it starts to sound natural for them so they know what the natural language sounds like, and they're producing it, which kind of boosts their self-esteem and their willingness to try. And also, students make a lot of visual auditory connections in this process. Not every student learns to read by putting sounds together to make a word. Some students learn to read very visually, and they'll recognize a word by sight, by the shape of it, by what it begins with, by how it, like just something, and they'll remember, and they can read this through. Even if they don't remember the words completely 2 days later, they remember certain pieces. Right. And this is when we can now come back with our foundational skills and like, we have this beautiful paragraph. We've read it a number of times. Get in partners. You know, each of you take a turn reading it to your partner, then switch. Okay, now read it to another partner. You're going to read this till we can't stand reading it anymore. Then we're going to take that paragraph. We're going to cut it into sentences. And then we're going to put it back together. Then we're going to take those sentences and cut them into words. And we're going to put it back together, right? So now we're breaking it into parts. Then we're going to take those words and look at what we want to focus on. Initial sounds, the vowels, or the blends. Are we looking at, whatever it is you're looking at, you can break it down then. Like, oh, look, let's go back and notice every time we come across the sound, what letter would represent the sound? Let's go find it. You could turn it into anything, okay? And they will remember because they know what the word was, and they know what the word was because they know what the message was, because it was their idea. That is a really super speed way of explaining. So if you want, tell me in the chat how that works for you. And we would just repeat that cycle over and over and over. And students were picking up a lot of literacy. And it's in a scattered kind of way because they grasp what they're ready to grasp. You combine that with the very solid, structured, progressive instruction that the classroom teacher is doing, and you get the best of both worlds, right? We get one where students create the agenda, and we get one where the teacher creates the agenda, and it really flows. So one of the bonuses I have for you this evening is I think this one's 5, a 5-lesson sequence around a young lady and an older woman planting flowers in a garden, right? That's our picture we start with. And the lessons are scripted out, so you have a good model of what this whole part protocol lesson sequence looks like. Once you get the sequence down, you can plan 6, 30, 45-minute lessons in no time, because you're like, day 1, we're going to do this. Day 2, we're going to do this. Day 3, you know exactly where it's going. And the beauty is the students know exactly where it's going too. So they are ready for you once they get the pattern down. We did this over and over and over and had lots of good growth. The writing really improved. All right, so here's our quick review. It always takes me longer than I want. I feel bad for holding you. But I really appreciate you hanging in there through this. We're looking at second language research and monolingual research so we can pull the best of both worlds. We need to integrate the language and literacy and content and have shared responsibility. We need to beef up our oral language. And if we can, bring some whole part into that. Now, if you're pushing in, it's not a total waste for you, because what you could offer to do is say, if there's a little flexibility, like a writing block or something, or a little bit of time, like, can I take the class through an experience? Like, give me a picture with this content and I want to take them through that experience as a whole group lesson. You can work it in, or you can just pull certain pieces that work for you, right? Pull pieces of that process that you can squeeze in to what you're doing, pushing in. All right, really quickly in the chat, what's been most valuable so far, right? We started with you feeling really torn in all directions. What's the most valuable so far? How are you feeling about what we've been talking about? Still stressed, still unsure, validated, more confident? How are you feeling? Kathy, if you can only get one, if you want to start with one message, I think focus on oracy would be a great message to start with, right? Baby steps. Baby steps. Engage them in an idea, get them talking, repeat, 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 turn their ideas into text and read away. Then you can extend that and go to writing and say, now I want you to write your own. So maybe they're writing sentences, maybe they're writing their own paragraph, right? Then they could take that and write their own piece of text, because they've had so much practice and so many models that now they're ready to write on their own. So sometimes I will do that hold apart sequence, and then I'll spend the next couple lessons doing a writing assignment where they're applying all of that to their own, right? All right, the visuals, awesome. All right. All right, so we're just imagining what the world will be like when we all understand each other's roles and we just understand the missing pieces for our English learners, and then how we can advocate for ourselves as the core teacher or as the ELD teacher to really to kind of move our thinking forward, like reframe our mindset about what our jobs are there. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit, so because I've taken up a lot of your time. If you are interested and have any space in your brain left for some professional development, next week on Wednesday, we have a live workshop via Zoom. It's a hold apart process, 2-hour workshop where we go through that lesson sequence very specifically. We analyze the lesson sequence for its parts, and then we piece by piece use a hold apart protocol planner to plan your own lesson sequence that you can rinse and repeat over and over and over. You also get lots of examples as giveaways and take home enough to keep you busy for the next month or so with your students, and with the knowledge of knowing how to do it. And all of that and the recording and the resources go into a little place on our portal where you can get to it from now through the end of August. Again, that is happening next Wednesday. And in our follow-up email, I will share the link with you for how to register for that. If I can get myself together quickly here, I can share it as well. I want to share this folder with you that I have. Let me copy my link. It has the lesson plan sequence in it. It has a copy of the slides, and it has the workbook in there. So here you go. There's your access to that. And then let me grab the link for the 45 for the 2-hour workshop next week, where it's the practical side. Like, okay, now I understand hold apart. How do I do it? What exactly does planning one look like? If you're interested in that, here's your link there. That's also recorded that you can continue to refer back to it. You get lots of lots of things there. If you need some graduate credit or you need a little extra time and you want to go a little deeper, I will share with you what's in the middle of the slide here is our active learning for early literacy. It's a 15-hour course. It goes deeper, provides more examples, right? The 2 hours will get you started. Active learning for early literacy takes you into, okay, now that I have the basic down, what are all the different variations and follow-ups I can do? If you like the idea of both of those, then this link will take you to the plus, which includes the whole to part 2 hour, includes active learning for early literacy, and gives you 2 coaching sessions where you can get with me and really talk through your plan and get feedback and do all of that. And then we have some Zoom time. All right. In your shared folder, you'll find that 5-lesson sequence. That's an example of whole to part that you can use as a model. Let me share one more link for just the active learning course.
Kelly, the link says your original link says we need access. We can't get to the original one.
I think I shared the individual pieces and not the folder. I think that's what happened. Hang on one second. As I taking you on an exploration of my Google Drive. Whole early literacy. Thank you for your patience here. Share. All right, this link will take you to the folder with all of the goodies. And this link will take you to the 15-hour course. This link will take you to the bundle with the hold apart, the 15-hour course, plus the coaching sessions. I know I would love your feedback on that. Is it too many options? Would you like just one option at a time? Do you like knowing all the options? I've gone back and forth a million times in my head about this. I kind of like letting you know all that's out there, let you make a decision, but I get it could be kind of overwhelming. And there's the 2-hour workshop registration. All right, so I will follow up with an email that tells you where to find the replay. It will have the link to the Google Drive folder. It will have the links to these next steps you can take as follow-up to this. And that'll all be in the email, so you have it all in one place. And also make sure you get your bonus lesson sequence, you have your slides, anything I'm forgetting. All right, thank you, Kathy. That is very helpful. Okay, in mine, it came up, the link in the chat came up with a description. Does it come up that way in yours? Where it says active learning for early literacy? It has the different titles. Okay, so the whole to part, or the first link you have there, is the Google Drive. Then you have active learning for early literacy, which is the 15-hour, after you know how to do the whole to part process, then active learning for early literacy takes you into now how do you make modifications, extensions, stretch it out, get more from it. Then after that, you have active learning for early literacy plus, which is the whole shebang the Hold Apart, the Active Learning for Early Literacy course, and 2 coaching sessions. It's the bundle and save, which makes me think of that State Farm commercial. Bundle, sabe. All right, the next one says Hold Apart live 2-hour workshop. That's just working through how to do Hold Apart. That's next Wednesday, 2 hours, 6 to 8 Eastern time. And we go through step by step with examples looking at, and then you get a couple more, 2 more sets of already done for you Hold Apart lesson sequences to help you get started. So lots of options. I love all your suggestions and feedback. Feel free to email me as well if the chat isn't where you want to put things and you want to send me an email. My email address is info@englishlearnerportal.com. I'm sure you get emails from there, but that comes to me directly. Feel free to send me feedback, send me questions, anything you want to know. All of it will be in the email follow-up. I'll try to organize it so it's easy to know the differences between them. All right, thank you so much for your time, for your attention, for hanging in there this long on a school night. I greatly appreciate it. I am really appreciative of everyone trying to just figure out in all this change in our language arts curriculum across the country, where do our students fit in and where do our English language development programs fit in. If you think of any other challenges that are coming your way that you'd like some support with, feel free to throw those out there too. Yes, there will be a replay. I know the time zone thing gets me too. We always work on Eastern time zone here, but I know you see the numbers. So if you tuned in late because you're in the different time zone, the replay will be coming to you via email. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.